Okay, hello everybody again. I'm Katelyn and I'm back for my second vlog for Vikings, the first season. I wanted to wait a little bit to do this one because I just wanted to see how the first one turned out. I did notice a few things that I've tried to change around production-wise. Like you probably noticed the camera shaking a lot, like whenever I would kind of doing it on this one. Whenever I would tap on the table, because I just had a camcorder and I didn't have a tripod for it, so I just had it sitting on like an upside down coffee mug that wasn't very stable. But I figured out a way to film on my laptop, so that's, a little bit more secure. I tried sitting it on a chair instead of sitting it on the table, but I don't know how to zoom in on the image for that, so I just have it sitting on the table. But I think it's a bit more secure than the camera. And also, I just wanted to, let's see. Yeah, I just wanted to clear up one little error of sorts that I kept making on the previous vlog about Gabriel Byrne. I kept calling him Gabriel Burns. It's not Gabriel Burns, it's Gabriel Byrne. He only has one burn, that is all he needs. And the character's name, anyway, is Earl Haroldson. Earl as in his title. I don't know. I don't think they ever say what his first name is, but Haroldson, son of Harold, is what his name means. So we'll just call him Haroldson. And all right, so let's get on to I got little notes, little bullet points of stuff I want to talk about since I did kind of ramble on a lot in the first vlog. So we'll just see how that goes. So anyway, the second episode is called Wrath of the Norsemen, which, promises to be a pretty exciting episode, a lot more exciting than the first one, and it is. Quite a lot happens in this episode, to the point that after I watched it, I was starting to read the episode description of the third episode. I didn't want to watch it yet, but it sounded like the second half of what I had already watched. So I started to watch the beginning of the third episode because every episode after the first one does the, previously on Vikings, and it just shows, little highlights of what happened in the previous episode, just to make sure that I didn't accidentally watch two episodes in one. That is how much happens in the second episode. So basically, it starts out, it's after they've tested the ship. Ragnar, the main character, his brother Rollo, and Floki, who built the ship. And they're having a meeting. Ragnar knows a guy who can just arrange meetings. He knows a guy who knows every other guy. So they're in this guy's house. And the guy who arranged the meeting, his name is Eric, because, what's a Viking story without a guy named Eric in it? I think there's also a guy named Leif, but of course there would be. But anyway, Eric Martin, I think, is the guy's whole name. I'm not sure how that works with the last names in Norway, because I know a lot of Scandinavian people, they go by their last name is technically not a last name. It's just the father or mother's name with son or daughter at the end. Like Leif Erikson, an actual Viking, he was called that because his father was Eric the Red. So he was literally he was called Eric's son. But anyway, this Eric character in Vikings, he sort of, everybody in this show, it kind of reminds me of somebody from something else, but he's got hair like Sabretooth from the very first X-Men movie. Not the Lieb Schreiber one. I don't know who played him, but it's very distinguishing. And before I remembered what his name was, I just kind of called him Big Blonde Dude, because he's a really big guy, and I don't know if it's his real hair. It's probably a wig, but it's like he's wearing a highlighter on his head. You can immediately spot Big Blonde Dude in the crowd, so it's a helpful character trait. But anyway, they're having this meeting in his house, and Ragnar's explaining his plan, how he wants to, and he finally does say, what makes him think that there is land to the west, because, the whole point of the previous episode was that Earl Haraldson did not believe there was any land, so that's why he wouldn't let Ragnar go to the west. But this guy named Canute, who's very skeptical about the whole thing, he asks Ragnar, well, how do you know that there's land to the west? And Ragnar says, I heard stories. Like, no proof of anything, I just heard people talking outside. I'm in an apartment, a new apartment, so I'm a little shaky about doing this just because I'm not sure if, how easy to hear I am or not. But anyway, we kind of get a little bit of a similar scene like we had with Rollo in the first episode, where this Canute guy is not convinced. He thinks it's a stupid waste of time, and Ragnar has to convince him to go along with it. And Canute seems to change his mind very quickly about deciding to go, and you find out why later. But apparently the Graham Chapman henchman of Haraldson's that you see at the end of the first episode has been listening in on this meeting, or at least he's been tipped off to the fact that it was taking place. So he's going to go to Haraldsson to rat them out. And, he does that, but for some reason, well, all they know is that a meeting has taken place. Haraldsson can't really legally do anything about this because they haven't actually committed any crimes yet. So he basically says, just let them go for now. It'll be more interesting later. But then we get a scene, an odd scene, with Haraldsson's wife. And everyone calls her Siggy. I don't know if that's short for anything. Probably I know there's a lot of characters in Norse mythology that have an SIG at the beginning, like Sigyn, Loki's wife. Sigrun, I know, is a Scandinavian name. Sigurd is actually a man's name, like Sigur Rós, the singer. But anyway, she's always Siggy. And Graham Chapman henchman kind of has a moment with her. She says something kind of provocative, and so he kind of looks at her. And Earl Haraldsson says to him, "No, if you like my wife, if she likes you too, we can arrange for the two of you to spend the night together. I can totally do that if she wants it." And so Graham Chapman says, "Okay." So they do this, but it turns out to all be a trap. It's a trap, because Earl Haraldsson saw this guy eyeing his wife, and he basically set this all up. The wife is in on it too. It's kind of funny because they get in bed, and then at first she's being, really lovey-dovey, and then all of a sudden she just starts beating the crap out of Graham Chapman in bed. But it turns out this was all just a setup to see if Graham Chapman would go through with it or not. And he went through with it, so Earl Haraldsson has all of his other henchmen basically waiting outside the room for, the jig to be up, and they take him out back and kill him. But I get the idea of the plot, of, the scheme, of how this was a trap, but I'm not sure if the presentation of it really made sense, because the whole time Earl Haraldsson is saying it's all up to the wife to decide if she wants to do this or not. He's the one who makes the offer to arrange this. It's not like Graham Chapman was doing anything behind his back. And that's another thing, because Earl Haraldsson says later on, I had to kill him because how dare he think so low of me that I would give my wife to him. You did! And what's more, you in a way kind of didn't, because you were implying that it was her decision. So, I don't... the guy was... And they were even saying, Graham Chapman, well, we never thought he would betray us like this. He seemed like the most trustworthy one. Well, he went along with what you told him to do, what you allowed him to do because he thought it was okay. Like, he wasn't impugning anybody's honor in this, and now you've just cost yourself a henchman for really no reason. I don't know about that. But anyway, we're out one python. Uh, and also to talk a little more about Siggy, you start to get, more insight into her character in this episode. In the first episode, she was just, the Earl's wife. And, she's the one that boys have to kiss before they're officially considered men. And, then that also makes this whole, flesh trade scam a little confusing because you're kind of introducing the village men to this woman as somebody that you're totally allowed to, do romantic things with in front of the Earl. I don't know if that is like a legit practice in like old-fashioned Norway. I don't mean any offense by that. This just seemed like a very contrived way to kill off a character. And speaking of contrived scenes that don't really make sense and don't really go anywhere, I mentioned this in the previous vlog. It is in the second episode. This really odd, weird fight scene between Ragnar and Lagertha, his wife. And the setup for it is that, he's telling her about this plan to go west, and she just makes up her mind that she's going to be going on this quest too, because, she's done battle before. She can, fight as well as any man. But he doesn't want her to go because, they have a farm that they have to maintain. They have 2 kids that they have to take care of. You don't know, like, the son is 12 years old. You don't really know how old the daughter is. You don't even really know which one of them's older, but she's around his age. So these are kids who really do need adult supervision. And Lagertha is so pissed off about this that later that night, Ragnar is just minding his own business. She just jumps him with a sword and starts attacking him and demanding him to fight her off because she wants to prove to him how strong of a warrior she still is because she really wants to go on this mission to England with him. And I don't know what she wants him to do exactly. I mean, she tells him, defend yourself, fight me off. So he does that. He doesn't want to kill her, though, because she's his wife. So, like, he kind of knocks her down, and he said, okay, like, I defended myself again. She gets back up and, like, punches him. And then, like, he gets knocked down. He says, okay, you made your point, you won. She punches him again. Like, she hits him with the sword. And there's, like, another part where he's like, okay, I get you're mad. Look, we'll go to counseling. We'll figure out a way to work this out. And he starts, like, trying to kiss her, and she hits him again. And it's like, lady, what are you trying to accomplish? Do you seriously want one of you to kill the other? This is not going to fix anything. Especially because Ragnar made a perfectly logical explanation for why you can't come this one time. It was just such a strange scene that I don't know, they try to present Lagertha as sort of the rational, wise character, and maybe that this is the point of her character, that she's such a warrior at heart that, sometimes she does snap a little bit and do illogical things, but, coming off of the whole Graham Chapman confusion to reveal betrayal and then kill off thing, I was already kind of in the mindset, I need something that makes a little more sense to happen right now, and this didn't quite make sense. And it's especially funny because after she's, beaten up Ragnar and gotten beat up by Ragnar, it's the 12-year-old boy who has to step in and break this all up. And it's really funny because I said in the previous episode that you don't really get a great sense of Bjorn's character, the 12-year-old son. He comes in and basically, he's a man now, so he's embracing that. And he starts yelling at them like they're the kids and he's the parent. He said, "What's wrong with you? You're going to get yourselves killed. This is not how we argue in this family. And he's got like the accent. I never really noticed it except when he did it in this scene for some reason. It really stood out to me that the character was having an accent. But he's yelling, you've got to stop doing that right now. This is not how we handle things in this household. And Ragnar says, well, we were just having a discussion. Mommy and Daddy were just having an argument. Yeah, well, don't argue like that ever again. And then Ragnar tells him to shut up and go to bed. And I just I half expected the kid to just yell, by the way, Dad, you're grounded for a week. And they point out how funny it is that the roles have kind of reversed for a second there, but even then I think Lagertha tries to fight him a little bit, like, lady, let it go. Okay, you're a cool female character, don't get weird on me. We've already got a weird female character with Siggy. But yeah, more on Siggy. Yeah, I think I got a little off track there. I'll have to watch back and see. But in this episode, you start to learn a lot more about her character and kind of her role in all of these politics that Haraldson, Gabriel Byrne, is practicing all this crooked politics, sort of. You kind of get the sense that she is the one controlling him. Like she knows he has all these insecurities, and he's paranoid, and it's almost like she'll do something to kind of fan those flames a little bit. Like there's a scene where they're alone, and she's telling him, like, your enemies are everywhere, but they cannot prevail. They cannot prevail. And she's got all this Viking eyeliner on, so like her eyes really stick out, and they look very expressive and very hypnotic. But so that's Siggy. Okay, but getting back to the plot, after they have the meeting, they've decided, all these guys, all these crew members are in. They're going to go on this voyage with Ragnar to England, but they still got to finish making the boat. Like Floki, who built the ship, he's the wood guy. He spends all his time in the forest stroking his wood, but he makes the ship. He doesn't make the anchor, though, so they got to get the anchor from a blacksmith in the town. So, Floki makes that arrangement. And then the guy brings the anchor, and he also brings his daughter. There was some kind of deal going on there where, I guess if Floki paid him enough, then the guy would bring his daughter, and for the day she would be the servant or whatever. And you get this scene where she's got like a big bowl of water that she's passing out to all the guys. It's all like one big open bowl that they're supposed to wash their faces in. For some reason, though, every time one of the guys washes his face in it, he clears his nose into the water, like he does this. And then they pass this along to the next guy. Like, okay, I know, back in the days, you've heard the saying, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's because there always was sort of a pecking order to who got to wash first. They only had so much water. And, the saying comes from because the baby, the children, were the last ones to get washed, and usually by then the water was so dirty that you couldn't always see the kids in it. But I get that there's a pecking order here. Do you really have to, and if you're the last person, then yeah, you're going to get the shaft on washing with this water, but do you really have to do that? Especially, you see Ragnar doing it. You're trying to not make these guys resent you right now. So maybe just don't do that. But then I've not talked about Rollo yet in this episode. I told you the story with him, that he has this past with Lagertha, and we find out, or at least it gets hinted at, that Ragnar knows about it, and almost maybe jokingly, sometimes he kind of brings it up to his wife just to make her mad, but we get a scene with Rollo and this servant girl, the daughter of the blacksmith, where he molests her. And the understanding is that he's doing this to vent sexual frustration over Lagertha. Like, you learn, it's established in the first episode that he pretty much always thinks of her whenever he's with another woman. So, well, what he does to this girl, what does that say about him and Lagertha? Yeah. But again, I've sort of talked about this in the previous vlog. A lot of these characters, even the good ones, you're kind of not supposed to know 100% where you stand with them. And Rollo, for all intents and purposes, is a good guy. He's the brother of the protagonist who is helping him. But you get the sense like he, maybe later in the series, is going to turn to the dark side or betray Ragnar, something like that. I'm talking to people who've probably already seen the whole series so far, so you're probably way ahead of me, so don't tell me what Rollo does. But I'm getting the sense as a first-time viewer that, bad things are going to happen with this character. So then they leave, they set off on their voyage, and they're going to go to England. And I actually had to kind of laugh to myself for a minute when I was watching this scene of them first sailing off, because it just sort of occurred to me, so far, the plot of Vikings is pretty much Watership Down, except with humans, and somehow less violence than the animated movie about bunnies. Because you've got, this group of people living in this little settlement colony, and the colony's crooked, and the leader is a naysayer who hates everybody, and the one, you got your protagonist who dreams of something better and is a born leader, and then he's got his friend, Floki, who's kind of the weird spiritual guy who has visions and stuff like that, and then you got like the short-tempered, brutish character, Rollo, who is mostly the muscle, but he's kind of tactful too. But I kind of doubt the similarities are going to go on from there, but maybe they will. But lack of violence does not remain the case for this episode for very long after the voyage starts out, and actually Ragnar, there's violence on the boat before they even get to England, because in the middle of the voyage, they've been sailing for days. They're kind of, all they have is that little compass, the floating board thing that we see in the first episode. And Ragnar is kind of just navigating on a prayer at this point. He doesn't even know, even if they are sailing on course, he doesn't know if they're ever going to get to anything. And this one character just snaps. He starts ranting about how maybe Ragnar is actually Loki, the trickster god in disguise, and how, this is a cursed voyage, and they are all cursed men, and this boat is cursed, and the sky is cursed, and my beard is cursed, and he just starts ranting and raving like a lunatic. And at first you think maybe Ragnar is just gonna punch the guy, because he's good at punching, but or there's you figure he's been established as the more rational brother as opposed to Rollo, so what's he gonna do? He just whips out a knife and stabs the guy in the throat. He's dead. End of story. You don't know what happens to the body. You can assume he throws it overboard, but you don't know. So, morale booster for the voyage right there. Of course, it has been days. I don't know how much food they brought, so maybe they are going to need a little extra protein. But then we get kind of an interesting, again, sort of a look into how Vikings operate right after this, because yeah, we do need a little bit of a morale booster after, one of the crew members went crazy and got murdered by the captain. So Ragnar tells Rollo to release the ravens, and but basically what happens is I don't know if this is accurate. It seems like it would be because it just seems very rational. But basically what they do is the Vikings they bring this cage full of ravens, and after so many days of sailing, if they're not sure if they're close to land yet, they release a couple of them. And the idea is supposed to be if there is no land, the ravens will come back to the boat. But if they don't come back, that means there is land close by because that's where they decided to settle down. So they do this, and you get the sense it fades to black for a commercial break and then comes back on. You get the sense they've been waiting for a little while, and we get kind of a despairing fake out where Ragnar hears wings flapping and he's upset because, oh god, they came back, there is no land, what are we going to do? And then he looks up and he sees that they're actually seagulls, not the ravens, so they are at land, and that land is England. And again, we see what's in England. And again, they address the language issue. As I said in the previous vlog, the first episode, it's all Viking characters. So everybody is speaking the same language. So they only have to establish one time at the very beginning that the characters are actually speaking Old Norse. But now we are dealing with another culture that speaks a different language. They speak Old English. And how are you going to distinguish this? Because now we have two languages that none of the actors are actually going to be speaking very long. Well, again, they obviously they introduce the people in England, and it's a monastery, like on a hill by the sea, is the place where the Vikings arrive. And we get an introductory scene of this monk named Athelstan, I think is his name. And he has had a dream that a creature, a demon from the sea, is coming and is going to punish the monks. And he's telling this to the head monk. And the head monk doesn't believe him, tells him go to bed. But they're speaking at first, like the conversation is already in English by this point, but the first couple of lines they're speaking Old English, and then Athelstan goes to the head monk, and just kind of a funny line after we've seen Athelstan speaking Old English, and then he's telling the head monk about his dream in modern English, and the old monk says to him, what do you speak? Like, what do you speak? Meaning, like, what are you talking about? But it's almost like he's asking him, like, what language are you speaking? Pick one, man. This is getting ridiculous. But anyway, so we're introduced to the monks, and we're right off the bat introduced to this Athelstan character, who you realize is going to be like sort of the main monk character in this episode anyway. And then we cut back to the Vikings. They land on shore, but since the monastery was up on a hill overlooking the sea, the monks have in fact seen this ship coming. They don't know really what to make of these Vikings. They've never met Vikings before, so they don't know what to expect. But they figure this is probably not going to be a good thing, especially after this dream that Athelstan has had about monsters from the sea coming. So the monks have decided they don't have weapons, obviously. They don't know how to fight. Even if you gave them a weapon, they probably wouldn't know what to do with it. So they're taking a smart approach. They figure, that these guys, we don't want to deal with these guys. So let's just hide in the closet, stay out of their way, let them do what they want. and the Vikings come to the monastery. Now, we know what Vikings did. You know, this isn't looking very good. One way or another, something unfortunate is going to happen to these monks, but you're wondering the whole time you're watching this, because they do sort of build up the suspense, a little bit. You know how it keeps cutting back and forth between, the Vikings approaching this hiding place and the monks kind of huddled in there not knowing what to do. And you're just wondering, are the Vikings really going to, attack them? These guys pose no threat. Please don't tell me they're going to attack them. Well, they bust open the doors, take one look at the monks. The head monk tries to, he's just praying, really. Maybe they thought he was like murmuring incantations against them or something. They just start slaughtering monks, like left and right, and then they start running around after they've killed off most of them in like the main, I guess it's like a stable that they're in, the main place where most of them are hiding. The Vikings start running around looking for more monks, and the monks are hiding in other places. Like they go into a dormitory, and monks are all hiding under the beds. They pull them out from under the beds and kill the monks. And I hate to raise this specter, but just the way this whole thing is staged, it kind of reminded me of Schindler's List a little bit, because there's a scene in this concentration camp where this one little kid is trying to find a place to hide from the Nazis because they're taking all the kids away to another camp. And he just goes through like this entire building looking for hiding places. Like every single place you can possibly think of to hide in, there's already somebody else in it. And so the kid in that movie ends up hiding in a latrine. Like it's like a long box with a lid on it with like, toilet holes in it. And you can lift up this whole lid, and it's big enough for like a few people to fit inside, filled with fecal matter, but a person can fit inside it, so that's what the kid does. They do that in Vikings. There's a monk hiding in the latrine. It's like built exactly the same way as the one in Schindler's List. Like we get a little montage before that of like the Vikings finding monks hiding in all different places, and they're killing them. And coming off of that, I hate to say that we almost get kind of a comical scene with this, because it's not comical, it's horrifying to think about it. But Rollo finds the guy who's in the latrine. He finds him because he just happens to be walking by while the monk in the latrine gags from the smell of it. So like he opens up the lid and the monk is in there, and he pulls him out. And the kind of funny part in this is that Rollo can't quite do anything to the guy because the smell is so bad that like he doesn't want to get too close to him. So it's like he throws down his weapons and he just starts kicking him. Like, okay, I don't want to have to smell you on my weapons. I'm not going to do that. So I'll just brutalize you in another way. But this review's going to a dark place. Where the whole language thing starts to get really complex and still very well handled is when Ragnar finds Athelstan, the monk who had the dream about them coming. And it turns out that Athelstan actually speaks Old Norse because he travels a lot, so he has to be versed in several languages in order to, spread the church's teachings to other cultures. And what they do, how they reveal that he can speak this other language, is Ragnar, lunges at him like he's going to kill him, and Athelstan says something in Old Norse. Like, the dialogue has all been in English, and all of a sudden he says something in Old Norse with subtitles. And then Ragnar says in English, how do you speak our language? And then from there on, the dialogue is all in English. So, just again, it's slipping back into like the reality of the situation, language-wise, to remind you that this is not in English. Which, I don't know why, I just think that's really neat, because, again, it's like in a book, where it'll tell you they were speaking in this language, but here's what they were saying. And then every once in a while in a book, with scene changes, and with, different characters speaking different languages, you do want to give a reminder to the audience. So basically what ends up happening is Ragnar decides this monk who can speak their language, might be more useful if we keep him alive. So he decides we're going to bring him back with us as a slave. And they've looted the church because, and real Vikings did this too, because they actually specifically targeted churches, because churches had a lot of, valuable artifacts in them. Like a lot of gold and silver and gemstones and stuff on the relics. And they weren't very well guarded, which you would think over time the people in England would have gotten wise to that, but apparently churches consistently were just never very well guarded back then, so Vikings always went after them. But the Vikings take all this stuff, and Rollo tries to kill Athelstan just because he's Rollo and Athelstan is there. But Ragnar talks him out of this. And then we get a scene with Floki. And, Floki gets a couple, funny moments, odd, funny moments throughout the episode. He's still very Floki-ish in this episode. Like earlier on when they're sailing, there's a scene where it's storming and the waves are getting really rough and there's thunder and lightning and all the guys are freaked out because they think the boat's going to sink. And then Floki's freaked out at first too, but then he has like this epiphany. Wait a minute. Why would Thor want to sink our ship when we're going to do all this great stuff for him? No, Thor isn't angry at us. He's celebrating, so we've got to keep sailing faster. Thor loves my boat. And he seriously is like dancing around like, all fruity around the rail of the ship. They're yelling, the gods love our boat, they love us. And of course what happens to him, a big wave comes and just drenches him. But, he just keeps on giggling and laughing about that, and Ragnar has to tell him, like, sit down. But even Ragnar, probably the actor, too, is having trouble keeping a straight face. But then Floki, I keep calling him Loki. I gotta just, like, write a big cue card with an F on it to condition me to say his name right. I love Floki. But he has a scene in the monastery after they've decided they're not going to kill Athelstan, where he's just kind of digging around in the room where, they write all the scriptures, so there's all this parchment sitting around. And Floki, for some reason, he, like, sticks the papers in his mouth and all of that. I guess it's for a spiritual thing, because, like, the paper comes from wood. But I'm just watching this thinking to myself, man, with the health issues that England had back then, I think Floki just got like 7 diseases from licking that paper. But he makes a big pile of them and sets them on fire. And like the impression I got at first from this is that they establish in an earlier scene that the Vikings believe you can see the future by looking into fire, because there's a scene where Haraldson confronts the guy who made the anchor for Ragnar's ship, and he knows the guy did it, so he kills him in his own fire pit while the blacksmith is in the middle of working. And they say this to him, it's said that you can see your future in the flames. What do you see in the flames? And the blacksmith just kind of looks up at him and says, I see my own death. and said, okay, so they stick his face in the flames. Like, if I had to die that way, I would probably say something like that too. Just why not? Go out with a laugh. You're screwed. But anyway, you kind of get the sense that maybe that's what Floki's doing when he makes the fire. Like, he kind of wants a little hint of what to expect on the voyage back. You find out later, like in episode 3, that there's probably another reason behind this. I don't know why. I don't know why this bothers me so much. I guess it's just because it's such a. I feel betrayed. Like, I was told that these were relatable characters, and now here they are. They've suddenly, in the second episode, or have done like a complete 180 and are just like pillaging and raping and murdering. It's almost like this is a show about Vikings doing Viking things, but I. So basically, they take all these monks. It's not just Athelstan that they keep alive. They bring a few with them. It's like maybe 10 with them, and of course the whole monastery goes up in flames because Floki never put out that fire. And you wonder maybe if that was the intention too, like he wanted to just set a big fire and just leave it to take care of the rest of the mess. But then the episode ends with Athelstan on the ship looking miserable. You know, he realizes things are probably not going to sort themselves out. So he like puts on his monk hood and cuts to black. So all in all, thoughts on this episode? I don't know if I like this one so much. I mean, it's a good episode. It is entertaining, but there were just a lot of scenes that didn't make sense, and maybe they will later. Like, maybe they'll explain it later, but like a lot of them, like the whole killing Graham Chapman and like the whole fight with Lagertha, it just seems like lapses in the character's judgment. Like they're almost like they feel like very contrived scenes. So I'm not sure if that was just because of like the characters feeling like they're powerless and just kind of lashing out, like losing control of themselves. Like Lagertha with her bloodlust, and Haraldson with his paranoia, like he's being irrational because that's just how paranoid he is. I hope that's the case because, you know, the first episode I thought did a really good job of keeping grounded in the character logic, and this one seemed less so. It seemed very berserker. And then the whole, you know, attacking the monastery scene. It's unpleasant to talk about, but that's the idea. I mean, that's what Vikings did. And so again, you're seeing like these really dark sides to these characters that you grew to like pretty quickly in the. Okay, that's probably a good sign to stop the vlog for now. Something popped up on my screen telling me it's dropping frames because maybe this has gone on just a little too long, that my laptop is having trouble processing the memory. So I will stop there. I did like this episode, very exciting. A lot happened in this episode. I don't think I like it quite as much as the first one though, just because, again, like it seemed like issues with the writing. Possibly, maybe my opinion will change of it later, but still enjoyable, just slightly less so. And I can appreciate the flaws with it, I guess, because I don't know if they even are flaws. I think it's just showing character flaws, like really believable character flaws. So I am very curious to see how this goes on with all these morally ambiguous characters now. So that's episode 2. I'll be back for episode 3. See ya.